1 FM 90.
Brought to you by Housing Finance Bank, a financial institution regulated by Bank of Uganda. Housing Finance Bank, we make it easy.
Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
A very good evening to you, and thank you very much for joining us for this edition of Spectrum. We are live on Radio 1 FM 90, which is broadcasting from the Central Building here along Dastool Street in the heart of our city, Kampala. We are also live on our website, which is www.radio1fm90.com. While on that website, you click on the icon with the word Listen Live. When you do that, you will be able to listen to us from anywhere across this globe. There's also another option of listening to this radio station via the different radio listening apps, which can be obtained from the Google stores of your smartphone. You download any of those radio listening apps, look for Radio 1 FM 90, and as long as you have an internet connection, you will be with us all the time. Finally, there's the option of listening to us via DSTV. If you have a DSTV connection, look for audio channel 897. You'll find Radio 1 there all through, and continue to listen to our quality programming. On this edition of Spectrum, we'll be looking at issues arising around marriage and divorce in the Ugandan context. Now, marriage and divorce issues remain a major area of reflection in Uganda, given a number of court decisions that have been given out as couples seek redress in courts of law, either for settlements or divorce. Now, there has been a court ruling recently in which a woman was allowed to take only curtains from the matrimonial home as the couple shared the property through the court process. Now, this has been considered in some circles as unfair. Now, women activists have continued to push for fairness and have argued that Parliament should act a law that, among other things, addresses these issues holistically. The marriage and divorce bill, one time, was a hot topic in Parliament. It was shelved. Then marriage bill was brought out after there was an argument that there was something wrong with the title to include the word divorce. But ever since the marriage bill was talked about, it has not been tabled in Parliament for the relevant action. Today, a Muslim rights organization petitioned the Constitutional Court about similar issues, but this time touching on the manner in which family matters are handled under the Muslim setup. Now, they want this matter addressed through legislation in Parliament. So this evening, we will focus on these two emerging issues as we discuss issues around marriage and divorce in the Ugandan context. Share with us your views using the WhatsApp line, which is 0703 090 090, and the panelists will respond to your questions or comment. I have two guests this evening. Ms. Prima Kwagala, Executive Director, Women Pro Bono Initiative, joins us on the line. Good evening, Ms. Prima Kwagala.
Good evening, Kenneth, and it's really nice to be on the show every time.
Thank you very much for joining us on the line. We'll be joined shortly in studio by Ms. Fatina Nachtende, a lawyer at the Islamic Women's Initiative for Justice, Law and Peace, the civil society organization that petitioned the Constitutional Court today, raising a number of issues on the side of Muslims. Let's begin with you, Ms. Prima Kwagala. I'll begin by asking you to give me your views about how issues of marriage and divorce are actually being handled under the current setup of the law, and what you think needs to change, or what you think needs to actually be upheld. Let's hear your views as we begin this discussion.
Kenneth, the concept of marriage in our country carries so many meaning for so many people in different contexts. And as such, there are so many ideas and constructs surrounding marriage in our community. From a legal perspective, most of the laws we have are laws that were put in place by colonialists. You and I are aware that the colonialists left this country almost more than 60 years ago. Soon we will be, in a few months, we will be celebrating independence from these colonialists. But unfortunately, the shackles of those colonialists and the laws and legislatures they left behind still hound us. And this carries on to again the construction or the construct of marriage that today we are discussing. The construction of divorce as it was handed down to us. As a community, we had marriages in our families and how we understood a family to be. I know that this is the same discussion that has led my sisters, the Muslim sisters, to court, constitutional court. They're trying to reconcile how marriage in our community is understood, how marriage is understood in the Quran, and how, again, the laws we have in place are construing this whole thing. So marrying, all the definition, the understanding, the construct, the line, is not a big challenge. So countries have marriage under the Muhammad, which I think also establishes the Qadis courts where people who subscribe to Islam would rather sort their issues out. We have marriage under the Hindu laws and practices. You know that Indians and people that practice Hinduism in our country have been socialized to become Ugandans, really. Most of them have stayed here and have been accepted as Ugandans in our community. So they are allowed to practice their religion and how they do marry. We have our customary marriage act, a very old law again, colonial law, which has its issues. Colonialists wrote that law on the basis of how they understood our culture. And that law is what many people are implementing. Unfortunately, the customary law or the act as is sometimes doesn't align how people are practicing their customs and cultures related to marriage. And again, when you come to how courts have been interpreting customary marriages as understood in the more than 66 customs and cultures recognized by our Constitution, there are variances that we have to discuss as we are seeing evolving from the several judicial decisions coming out of our courts today. So then we have the civil marriages and the church marriage. And, you know, the church marriages, the Christian marriages, all the people that subscribe to Christianity, you know, the Catholics, the Protestants, the Pentecostals. When we are talking about church marriages, we are bundling them all up under Christian marriage. But we know that Catholics have certain fundamental beliefs in marriage that sometimes they don't share with Pentecostals and Protestants or Seventh-day Adventists. So, I believe this is, again, one of the reasons that Honorable Pendi has come up with the Marriage Act, which has been discussed in Parliament, I think, for almost the past 2 decades. It comes up, it is shelved. People, you know, at some point it was the Marriage and Divorce Bill. People called it the MAD Bill. And somehow it was shelved because of having to discuss divorce when you're talking about marriage. So, the concept and construction of marriage, I think, is a necessary discussion we must have, because even the bill that is currently before Parliament, it has decided to eliminate our Muslim sisters, because they are saying that those should continue with their Mohammedan law. And, you know, their issues are not being consolidated in this Marriage Act, which is seeking to consolidate all aspects of marriage laws except the Mohammedan or the Muslim people and how they define that. So I'm excited that you decided to have discussion and looking forward to your questions and how I can respond to them at some point, hopefully.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Prima, with that overview. And good enough in studio, we have now Ms. Fatina Nachitende, lawyer at the Islamic Women's Initiative for Justice, Law and Peace. Like I already indicated, they filed a petition in the Constitutional Court today, raising a number of issues around what you have just hinted on there. Let's now welcome her views on this particular aspect. Ms. Nachitende, you went to court today. You are complaining about issues that almost relate to what Ms. Prima has been hinting on, issues to do with how family disputes legally handled in this country, but under the Muslim faith. What exactly are the issues that you're putting across?
Okay, thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. The issues we are trying to put across, we are petitioning for the operationalization of the Qadhi's courts. The Qadhi's courts are the courts, we would say the Muslim, the courts that handle the Muslim personal law or the Islamic adjudication courts. These are courts that are set up at the, we have the Uganda Muslim Supreme Council, we have Chibuli, and in different places. We are basically advocating for the formalization of those courts. They are existing, but they are operating informally. And as a result, we see that there are some loopholes in the operation of those courts because of lack of operationalization. These courts handle matters of Muslim personal law to do with marriage, divorce, succession, custody, maintenance, things like that.
Well, when you say operationalization, what exactly do you mean? What is missing in that regard?
There is an article of the Constitution, hence the constitutional petition. There is an Article 129 of the Constitution that provides for these courts. It says that the law and justice shall be exercised within these courts of law, and among those courts there is the Qadhi's courts to handle specific matters of Muslim personal law. Now these courts are there; they are informal.
What do you mean they're informal?
They are operating, but they are not recognized under the legal justice system of Uganda. They are not in that line of the courts as we have them: High Court, Court of Appeal, Supreme Court, the Magistrates' Courts. They are not anywhere in that line. So we are petitioning to see that they are given a place in that justice system.
But you said these courts are already operating now, and they have been able to settle disputes and resolve some issues around families and marriages.
Yes.
Is there any particular issue that you think needs to change when you say they are informal? One would say they are already working. What's the problem?
Yes, we would say that they are working, but they have no regulations. They have no procedural laws governing them. Those laws that are formal, so there is all those irregularities that are ongoing in those courts, and the reason is because they lack the formality.
Give us some examples.
For example, if someone takes a matter there, like a woman complains maybe about the husband, the law is, or what ought to have to be done, is that the court summons the husband or sends the court clerk to summon the husband to compel them to come to court. But these courts will tell you, bring your husband. And then you would say, but how can I bring him to court? He has done all these injustices to me. He won't even listen to me if I tell him you are summoned at court. But the court will still insist, if you can't produce your husband, then we cannot proceed.
So it's your duty.
That's a procedural injustice.
It's a duty as a complainant to make sure that your husband appears in court.
That your husband appears in court, which is not the case in these courts that we have. Because if I report a matter, that someone should come from a representative of court. He's down. He's supposed to. He's down. He's supposed to look for my husband and not me looking for my husband. And then maybe the other issues that come around, there is no representation. You cannot bring an advocate to represent you. Sometimes those are sensitive matters that if I can explain them to someone and that someone can represent me in those courts without me having to be there, cry, express my emotions to those judges. Sometimes they may even think I'm lying. So there is it's not allowed to have an advocate to speak for you. You're supposed to speak for yourself. And all that is there because there is no rules and regulations and policies. If these courts are formalized, all those procedure aspects would be worked on. There would be paperwork, we would have an operating manual, and I think everything would go straight.
All right. So at the moment when you say there's no legal representation, what happens in court? Give us a picture of what happens. For instance, if you're the complainant, you have an issue, what happens in that situation?
The legal you come, you tell them I have an issue, and they would give you a form to fill. You fill it, all the details and all that. If they are if they are fine with everything you have filled and they feel like you've given them everything, they would write a letter and they would give it to you. And they tell you, take it to your husband and tell him we need him in court on 20th May. That's what happens. And then when you're successful in producing your husband, you will come, you and your husband. You will sit on the same bench. The husband will sit here and you'll sit here. And then they'll start asking you, firing you questions. Why this? Why that? Sometimes even the conduct of the judges, sometimes they act as themselves. They don't have any law governing their the procedure that they're supposed to take when they're listening to those matters. For example, they may even throw in a comment. They may say, land women are not land women, you can't manage them, something like that. But that's not a word that's supposed to come from a judge. And I know that is all because they lack a law or a regulation that tells them their job is just to listen and not prejudge.
All right.
Or and not be biased.
All right. Let's look at how this court is constituted, because it's strange when you say there is no representation. Let's look at the constitution of the court. The people are actually in the court.
By representation, I mean legal representation.
A lawyer to accompany you.
To accompany me, to represent my interests in the court. That is not there. Then the representation, let's say maybe on the panel, is also wanting, because sometimes there are issues to do with, for example, if I am a Muslim woman, I take a matter there and I feel like I am shy or I cannot express myself to this person. There are matters that I can best express to my fellow lady. And we see that the constitution of the judges and the adjudicators is the men. These men are leaders. Alhamdulillah, they are well versed with the Islamic rules and all that. But I would feel comfortable if I have a team of 2 women on their panel to be a part. If I feel like I cannot express something to a man, maybe they can excuse themselves and give me chance with these 2 women, and I explain to them exactly how I feel in my marriage, the injustice I feel that is ongoing, and things like that.
Now, you clearly understand marriage under the Muslim setup. Let's take a picture and look at how the situation is. To be honest with you, we rarely hear about issues around Muslim marriages. We rarely hear about those scandalous divorces and things like that happen. Are there any grievances that the women that you represent under your organization that they face? What are some of the examples, some of the things that you've seen as you do your work?
They do face a lot of grievances, and I would say why you don't hear most of those is basically because they are scared to come out. They are scared to come to these formal courts that we have. They are scared to come to, let's say, the High Court to present their issues. But they do face serious issues. Issues of marital rape. Sometimes they face issues of men wanting to approach them in a manner that is not natural. We know how intercourse is supposed to be naturally. but then their men sometimes force them to have it the other way around. But they choose to keep quiet because they know if they take matters to maybe the Kadhi's courts that we have, without the formalization and proper streamlining, they don't feel safe. They don't feel safe. And then also they feel like these are matters to do with Islam. These are religious matters that they cannot, that maybe these courts may not understand. So they end up keeping them in their homes. And yet they really need a voice. They need a proper system where they can express all those things from. And we do believe that with the formalization of these Kadhi's courts, the only thing that is missing is the formalization. Once they are formalized, we have regulations, we have procedural aspects all handled, we have a proper panel set up, everything. I feel like their interests would properly be represented.
All right, let's go back to Ms. Prima Kwagala. Ms. Prima Kwagala, you've listened in to the submission of your colleague here in studio, Nachitende. Do you agree with some of these issues? I know your organization also does handle a number of issues, and probably you've come across some of these concerns being raised. First of all, the fact that they want the Kadhi courts operationalized. Is that an issue that you think is wanting, that needs to be handled as soon as possible?
I don't subscribe to the Islamic religion, so I must agree with Council that the issues she raises are indeed a challenge. But we have issues with religion being very foreign to our culture. I was discussing with my team before this call. We have clients who are Muslims, and they come to our office when they have domestic issues. In most cases, because they've been frustrated. And like Council has mentioned, the inadequacies, the procedural challenges within the Kadhi's courts, where the mosques usually send them. The fact, it's a fact for sure that the leaders in this court are the Islamic.
Well, your line is breaking. We can't hear you clearly. I think we need to get back to you. Let me ask the engineers. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you quite
yes. Okay. Right. Go ahead with your contribution. You were breaking.
Yeah. So I was saying that the procedural issues she raises are very true and correct, and I have clients that have come to my office to seek justice outside Kadhi's courts because of the procedural injustices she just mentioned. One being that Kadhi's courts are not recognized by law as courts of record in our country. So whatever happens there is really to align with what the Islamic faith has to say. And unfortunately, the leaders of Islam are always men who may not be in position to appreciate women's concerns and grievances because they don't live in the space that women operate in. So the prayer that women should be allowed in the leadership or management and running of these courts, I think is a legitimate one. It is one that needs to be listened to. I'm handling currently a case. It is a case that includes succession issues. And in this case, the gentleman, a Muslim man, passed away when he had married only one wife, according to the Islamic religion. But he had other women he had fathered children with. Now, when he passed on and the surviving spouse was applying for letters of administration over his intestate estate, the family being strongly Islamic, most of them wanted to deal with the estate in accordance with the Islamic religion. Unfortunately, she found that if she went with that route, it is totally against her, because the leaders of the religion and the family, they wanted to make sure that they share the property, including her home, is shared with children outside the home that she was accustomed to with the husband when he was alive. I mean, you know very well that when someone passes, then too many children show up. And now all of a sudden they were demanding that she should share the home, and Islam had specific religion. She was married according to Islam. Now, suddenly she wanted the mainstream law, for lack of a better word, to start protecting her. Very tricky and slippery slope to navigate, but I agree with Council that it is important that Islam is aligned with the law of the land. And I think one of my call would be for the legislators currently considering the marriage law to consider including the Mohammedan Act in the mainstream Marriage Act. And when talking about courts of record, they too should be given guidelines on how to run these courts in accordance to the law of the land. But these courts should be subject to the Constitution. The Constitution should not be bowing to them.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90. Keep your comments coming on the WhatsApp line, which is 0703-090. Tell us what you think about what we're discussing. If you have a question or comment, send it to us, and the panelists will respond to some of the issues that you're putting across. We're going for a break now. When we return, we will dig deeper into these issues and try to see the prayers that the petitioners in the Constitutional Court are making, but also we're also hearing from Ms. Prima Kwagala, what are the issues that need to be addressed? Why do we continue seeing reluctancy from the executive and even Parliament to put in place a law that would address issues that are arising as far as marriage is concerned? Stay tuned to Radio 1 FM 90. We continue after this break.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90. Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Well, thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum, live on Radio 1 FM 90. Today we are looking at issues arising around marriage and divorce in the Ugandan context. I'm speaking to Ms. Prima Kwagala, Executive Director, Women Pro Bono Initiative, and Ms. Fatina Nachitende, lawyer at the Islamic Women's Initiative for Justice, Law and Peace. This organization was in the Constitutional Court today filing a petition calling for the operationalization of Qadhi courts to be able to address matters arising within the families under the Muslim faith. And in Parliament, we expect action on the issues of marriage, because there's a bill there that Honorable Sarah Opendi from Tororo District proposed to table, and she was granted leave to actually go and prepare. So we are also waiting for that particular bill to be tabled. But you, as members of the public, what would you want to see in such bills? Do you agree with the Islamic Women's Initiative for Justice, Law and Peace that there is need to actually put in place separate courts to handle issues arising from conflicts within Muslim families? Let me come to you, Ms. Fatia, to just briefly tell us what you want the Constitutional Court to do in regard to this issue. What are your prayers? And then we'll go to Ms. Kwagala to also hear the way forward from her as far as addressing this issue holistically is concerned.
Thank you. Basically, our prayers to the Constitutional Court is that the Constitutional Court orders the government to establish formal Qadhi's courts. How? By having an enabling law, that Muslim personal law that was enacted by Parliament, or that is enacted by Parliament, with clear and comprehensive legal provisions that their decisions should follow, should be sensitive to the peculiar issues of women and the principles, of course, of the Constitution, and that they are contrary, that they are in tandem with natural justice. That is what we need them, that they are cautious and alive to the needs of the women and the general court users. That is what basically we need. We need them to pass a law. We need them to order the Parliament to pass a law that enacts or formalizes the operation of these courts.
Right. Have you been doing any lobbying? You have members of Parliament who profess the Islamic faith, both male and female, in the House. If the government is not acting, if the executive is not acting, why don't you consider actually moving them to do the needful?
We even have the judges. There has always been those meetups with the judges and those with the judges and our representatives, the Muslims at the parliament. We have had engagements with them. Actually, there is one gentleman I know who is also on the push with us. He's called Dr. Abdul Hafiz Walusimbi. He's doing a good job in pushing the judges to advocating for this. And also we have engaged, but the law is, it is already a constitutional right that we have. It is already there in the Constitution. All we need to do is to push the court, or to push the Constitutional Court to order the Parliament to give us that right. We are not demanding for a new right. We are just demanding for something that we already have. It is a provision that is already there in the Constitution that these courts are supposed to operate. I am sure the framers of the Constitution were alive to the peculiar issues of the Muslim personal law, because they have a spiritual element. They have a spiritual element. When we are adjudicating them and addressing them, they have the Islamic element that that the courts or that the judges in these courts may not be alive to. So they were aware of that, I am sure. It is not something we are asking from scratch. It is something that the Constitution already provides for. All we need is to have the court to order the Parliament to push. Okay.
All right, let's go to Ms. Prima Kwagala. When you talk about issues of coming up with a law about marriage, divorce, and all those things, even in Parliament of Uganda, it becomes a difficult issue. Like you already stated, there have been countless times and attempts to actually present the laws to be enacted, but we see resistance. Sometimes we see people who come up, different stakeholders, religious leaders, and all the like. How do we arrive at a point where we agree that actually there's need to have some sort of regulation, a law to deal with these issues?
I think we are in argument that we are in need of guidance. We need a framework to which we all can submit to. But unfortunately, what we have in place, as I mentioned as we were beginning, are imported values, are imported definitions of what a family should look like. What we need to do as Ugandans, and our legislators really need to listen to us, is to enact laws that reflect the realities of Ugandans. How is a normal Ugandan defining a family? And I'm sure you know people in your community. I mean, two people start living together and everyone knows, oh, you're bawol. You know, that is the husband and so on. So the family is aware, they recognize this person. I know that there is procedures for how marriages should be. But now the law refuses to recognize or to see these people, to protect them, to offer them some kind of shelter. And I think it's what is happening to our Muslim sisters as well. The law, even as presented by Honorable Sarah Sendi, has expressly eliminated Islamic relationships because it seems like some sort of technical field that is only understood by people that subscribe to it. So in the absence of guidance, we see lots of abuse, especially to vulnerable people who have no opportunity to step aside and question the system. So the government needs to come to the aid of these people, especially women who are running to the Qadi's courts. And you're going to the Qadi's courts because it's the easiest place to easily communicate, to informally file a complaint. In the formal justice system, as we know it, many people are afraid to go there because you have to be literate, you have to speak a certain kind of language, you have to pay taxes, annuity, pay. I mean, go here, file this, file, and the common person doesn't know that. What the Cousins Court is offering you is a very informal system that helps. I mean, this is something you have studied for Islamic or people who are subscribed to Islam are trained from childhood on how some of these things operate. And unfortunately, the system or the laws as we know them are not recognizing this as a court of record. So whatever decisions are made there are very difficult to enforce. Or if you disagree with them, appeal procedures are not very clear, because once you step out of that system, you're moving into again a system which you were very afraid of starting with in the first place. So I agree with Council Nachitendo. I think that it is important for government, for our legislators to intervene, provide a framework that people can clearly follow and abide by.
All right, let's hear from the listeners who have sent in comments, and we already have a comment here from Muto, who says, marriage and divorce are sticky issues, very sensitive regardless of how you look at it. Patriarchy is the point we all miss here. It protects men. Generally, if the curtain's only judgment was passed by a lady, Prima indicated the colonialists indicated that the colonialists were the problem, but our cultures have never been fair to women. The colonialists in their home countries have women taking everything from men without batting an eye. Finding a law that is effective, I think, should be added to the list of things mankind has failed to solve. Such judgments will always cause outrage unless one of the parties just cedes voluntarily. That's a comment there from Muto, who is listening to us. We will ask you to respond to it, but let's get another comment coming in here from Samuel Mary Yiga, who is listening in from Namlondo Zone in Weogereri. He says, Kenneth, thank you for the show. Sincerely speaking, Islamic tribunals should be seriously streamlined with a proper panel set up, having a woman representative, just like other courts of law, handling marriage issues, because problems in marriages are cutting across all religions. That's a comment from Samuel Yiga there, who is listening to us. We have another comment from Anthony. Good evening, Spectrum. Most marriages are living in bondage. Since I was born, bad side of marriage is bigger than the good side of it. All I see is heartbroken, neglect, no respect, etc. I wish there will be an expiring date on marriage certificate which can enable the couples to renew it if she wishes or not. That's a comment from Anthony there, contributing to this discussion. We have another comment from Rona, listening in from Kampala. As for the examples, challenges shared by Council Fatina, I fail to understand how marital rape is an Islamic challenge. I also wonder if advocating for operationalization of the Islamic courts might not work against Muslim women. The religious-based institutions tend to change extremely slowly, if at all. May be better to empower Muslim women to speak out and leverage the formal justice system and integrate Islamic tenets therein. That's a question Rona is making there. Won't formalization become a problem to you? We have a comment coming in from Henry. Religious courts should be annexed on mainstream courts to advise on marriage and divorce proceedings. There is evidence between parties that will be binding. That's Henry there with that comment. We have a comment from Okello Patrick Bonyo, listening in from Busega. May I be enlightened about the kind of law being pushed for an interpretation in the Constitutional Court? Does it mean the current law is not working? I think let the law of the land be supreme to other laws, because we will start seeing other religious sects also coming up with their own doctrine, like the Jews, Adventists, Pentecostal, and others will also come up with their argument to satisfy their own interests. Well, those are some of the comments that are coming in, and I'll begin with you, Fatia, because there were those that were coming directly to you. For instance, from Rona, who seems to think that they do not understand what exactly you're looking for and the likelihood that this could work against you. How would you respond to that?
Okay, there is no way that formalization of these courts is going to work against us, because no one would want to live in a disorganized system. There are rules that are supposed to guide even the basic of unions. Even a family needs rules, it needs formalities. They need to budget, they need to know how the children behave at home. They need to know all that. So it's the same thing in these courts. We cannot let them just operate without regularities, without regulations, without laws governing their operation. So streamlining the operationalization or the operation or the handling of the matters in those courts, I don't see how it would turn against the Muslim women.
And she also gives a point here and says she does not understand how rape is an Islamic challenge. Did you particularly say it was an Islamic challenge, or can you explain that further?
Rape being an Islamic challenge, I think she was on my issue of marital rape. The marital rapes happen so much in the Muslim families, and most people do not believe it to be an offense, because they believe a man has a right to access a woman whenever they want, whether forcefully or what. He has to get his right from his woman. But it is not supposed to be like that. It is not supposed to be like that. They force them to do things like I explained, to have sexual intercourse the other way, and all that is not. It's not advocated for in Islam. It is not an Islamic issue. It's not an Islamic principle. It's against the rulings of Islam.
And then we have Henry, who actually thinks that your courts, the courts that you're talking about, should be annexed to the mainstream courts, should become part of the courts that we're talking about. For instance, if they put you under the family division and there was a specific department or division that handles issues to do with Muslim family-related disputes, would that be okay?
If I got was he the one asking about which law is not operational that we are trying to push for and all that?
That's another person, but you can combine. You can combine the questions.
Okay. We already have these courts, they are already operational, and if we can borrow a leaf from our neighbors here in Kenya, that is how it is. When we talk of formalization, we are talking about recognition of these laws under the justice system that is available. Let them give it a jurisdiction, a hierarchy, and they say these courts, they are directly, or their jurisdiction is like the jurisdiction of the magistrates' courts, for example. And we know that their decisions are appealable to such a court or to the High Court and something like that. We are talking about that. They don't need to have to be on the family division. They are safe where they are, because Muslims can best approach those places. We are not against the existence of the Qadhi's courts where they are. We are just, they are there, they are operational. We just want to see that they are streamlined.
All right. There's a listener here, Patrick Bonyo, who does not understand why you are specifically demanding for your own courts. He actually says we might have a situation where other religious sects might also demand for particular recognition. Can you explain why the Muslim faith needs this special arrangement?
We are not demanding for a law that is not there. We are demanding for a law. We are demanding for the operationalization of a law that is already there. It is a constitutional provision. They were also aware. They also acknowledged the fact that Muslim personal law, like I said, is a special kind of law. Our Islamic, when you look at this other secular law that we use, we see that it tags in almost all the issues, or all the concerns, or all the characteristics of the Christian marriages as we have them. They are almost the same as the civil marriages. However, the Muslim marriages are governed by the Islamic rules. They are governed by the Islamic rules. These rules may be, they may not be, the judges as we have them right now, they may not know the Islamic rules. They may be foreign to them. For example, if we have, for instance, the grounds of divorce under the Muslim, the Islamic religion may be slightly different. What Islamic religion demands from a man may be different from what the Christian religion demands from a man. And the Christian religion tallies very well with the laws as we have them now. So we do believe that marriage in the Islamic religion is a spiritual thing, and we do believe that the Muslims themselves who know the law, who know the Islamic rulings, are best suited to adjudicate over these matters.
All right. So as we come to the end of this discussion, let's hear your closing remarks, Nachitende. Going forward, what will you be doing now that you filed this petition in court? What else will you be doing to advocate for the rights of women under the Muslim faith?
Okay. First of all, as we await this, we intend to do more advocacy, more research, advocacy, and legal awareness to see to it that the women recognize the fact that Islam is there for them. Islam advocates for their rights, and that they should not feel inferior in any way. Islam recognizes them the same way it recognizes the men, and that they should not feel inferior to get the justice that they are supposed to get. And really hope that with the operationalization or the formalization of these courts which are already in operation can also help to reduce the backlog.
All right.
In the courts that we have.
Now, let's go to Ms. Prima Kwagala for response to some of the issues which were put across by the listener, but also for her parting or closing remarks.
I think there was one comment in relation to what I've been sharing. And I think there was a gentleman who seemed to disagree that colonialism may not have brought the complexity within our practice of marriage, but rather our cultures that refuse to change. I think I agree and disagree at the same time. I think colonialists understood our way of life and marriage in a way that I think we also do not express it. Our cultures are also not static. The way our parents and grandparents practiced marriage is quite different from the way we are experiencing and practicing marriage right now. My issue or point, and maybe advocacy at this point for all listeners and duty bearers, is for us to put in place regulatory frameworks that reflect our ways right now and the aspirations we look up to, as opposed to blindly just, copying what is happening in Britain or England and France and Saudi Arabia and, slapping it on our law books and hoping that people will abide by that. No, we need to inquire from our people. We need to do research. Now there's a bill that has been put there. Let us go out and make input to let our legislators know what is working for us and what we want the law to actually address. Now, Council Fatia is sharing that the Muslim women are actually okay with the Qadi's court, but they want to see women represented in the leadership of those courts. So can we make a law that reflects women in the ways of Islamic women as we see and experience them today? If there is no regulatory framework, yes, the Qadi's courts are there, but they are answerable to no one. What they are asking for is a framework. If this one fails, what is the next step? If that one fails, where can I appeal to? If the sheikh has made a bad ruling, how then do I criticize him? How do I go around that? Those regulatory frameworks, procedures, where you can run to in case one system fails you is not clear. And that is how people are perpetually living lives of abuse and discrimination and lots of violence because of lack of structure. So I'm not totally blaming colonialism, but there's this worship of colonial religions and ways while demonizing our cultures. And yet people seem to be stuck in their cultures and traditions and practice of marriage. So, I mean, let us take what is working and frame that for Ugandans. That is what I think.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Prima Kwagala, for your time there. And I want to thank you, Ms. Fatina Nakitende. But just one last comment. Somebody actually saying that what you're trying to do could be considered as unreligious, because under the Muslim faith, women have their place and they should respect that. What would you say?
Okay. That's a scholarly opinion, but his generalization of the fact that women should have their place is also, I think, something he has not done enough research about. When we talk of women having being represented on the panel, for instance, I think that is what he's alluding to. There are so many scholarly opinions that see to it that even in the history, I will just give him a verse or a history of Islam. When matters were brought to the Prophet and they were sensitive and they were only connoting women, he used to call a lady called Aisha. She was his wife, and she was very knowledgeable, and she could listen to the women, and they could open up to her and explain to her, and then she would take it back to the Prophet, and together they would she would take it back to the Prophet and then explain it to him in a different way. So it is not something that is alien to our religion. It is something that has been done in history, and if there are matters that can best be listened to by women, then why not?
All right. With that, we come to the end of Spectrum today. Thank you very much, Ms. Prima Kwagala, Executive Director, Women Pro Bono Initiative, and Fatina Nakitende, lawyer at the Islamic Women's Initiative for Justice, Law and Peace. Up next, we have the news in English with Ms. Josephine Dagano. Thereafter, we'll have the Soul Train with BB Junior.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.